a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. The Man in the High Castle. The Man in the High Castle is an alternate history novel by American writer Philip K. Dick. Set in 1962, 15 years after an alternative ending to World War II. The novel concerns intrigues between the victorious Axis powers, primarily Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany, as they rule over the former United States, as well as daily life under the resulting totalitarian rule. The Man in the High Castle won the Hugo Award for Best Novel in 1963. Beginning in 2015, the book was adapted as a multi-season TV series, with Dick's daughter, Dick Hackett, serving as one of the show's producers. Reported inspirations include Ward Moore's alternate Civil War history, Bring the Jubilee, various classic World War II histories, and the I Ching. The novel features a novel within the novel, comprising an alternate history within this alternate history wherein the Allies defeat the Axis. Background. In the novel's alternate history, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt was assassinated by Giuseppe Zongara in 1934, leading to the continuation of the Great Depression and U.S. isolationism during the opening of World War II. Adolf Hitler led Nazi Germany to conquer most of Europe and the Soviet Union, murdering Jews, Roma, Slavs, and other groups. Meanwhile, Imperial Japan occupied China before taking control of India and Oceania. The Nazis then helped Italy conquer most of Africa. As Japan invaded the U.S. West Coast, Germany invaded the U.S. East Coast and most of South America. By 1947, the U.S. and the remaining Allies surrendered to the Axis, ending the war. By the 1960s, Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany are the world's competing superpowers, with Japan establishing the Pacific States of America from the former Western United States, with the remaining Rocky Mountain states now a neutral buffer zone between the PSA and the Nazi-occupied former Eastern United States. For unknown reasons, Canada remains independent. Hitler, though still alive, is incapacitated from advanced syphilis, and Martin Bormann has become Chancellor of Germany, with Goebbels, Heydrich, Göring, Seyss-Inquart, and other Nazi leaders soon vying to take his place. The Nazis have drained the Mediterranean to make room for farmland, developed and used the hydrogen bomb, and designed rockets for extremely fast travel across the world as well as space, having colonized the Moon, Venus, and Mars. The novel is set mostly in San Francisco in the PSA here. Chinese residents first appear in the novel as second-class citizens and black people as slaves. The secondary setting of the novel is the Rocky Mountain states, namely the cities of Canyon City, Denver, and Cheyenne. Plot summary. In 1962, 15 years after Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany have won World War II, Robert Bob Charlton owns an Americano antique shop in San Francisco, California, which is most commonly frequented by the Japanese, who make a fetish of romanticized American cultural artifacts. Charlton is contacted by Nobusuke Tagami, a high-ranking Japanese trade official, who is seeking a gift to impress a visiting Swedish industrialist named Baines. Charlton's store is stocked in part with antiques from the Wyndham Matson Corporation, a metalworking company. Frank Frink, a secretly Jewish-American veteran of World War II, has just been fired from the Wyndham Matson factory, when he agrees to join a former co-worker to begin a handcrafted jewelry business. Meanwhile, Frink's ex-wife, Juliana, works as a judo instructor in Canyon City, Colorado, where she begins a sexual relationship with an Italian truck driver and ex-soldier, Joe Cinedella. Throughout the book, many of these characters frequently make important decisions using prophetic messages they interpret from the I Ching, a Chinese cultural import. Many characters are also reading a widely banned yet extremely popular new novel, The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, which depicts an alternate history in which the Allies won World War II, a concept that amazes and intrigues its readers. Frink reveals that the Wyndham Matson Corporation has been supplying Charlton with counterfeit antiques. which effectively works to blackmail Wyndham Matson for money to finance Frink's new jewelry venture. Tagami and Baines meet, but Baines repeatedly delays any real business as they await an expected third party from Japan. Suddenly, the public receives news of the death of the recently ill Chancellor of Germany, Martin Bormann. Charlton tentatively, on consignment, takes some of Frink's authentic, new metalwork and attempts to curry favor with a Japanese client, who surprisingly considers Frink's jewelry immensely spiritually alive. Juliana and Joe take a road trip to Denver, Colorado, and Joe impulsively decides they should go on a side trip to meet the mysterious Hawthorne Abenson, author of The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, who supposedly lives in a guarded fortress-like estate called the High Castle in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Soon, Joseph Goebbels is announced as the new German Chancellor. Baines and Tagami finally meet their Japanese contact as the Nazi secret police, the Sicherheitsdienst, close in to arrest Baines, who is actually revealed to be a Nazi defector named Rudolf Wegener. Wegener warns his contact, a famed Japanese general, of Operation Dandelion, an upcoming Goebbels-approved plan for the Nazis to surprise attack the Japanese home islands, in order to obliterate them in one swift stroke. As Frink is elsewhere exposed as a Jew and arrested, Wegener and Tagami are confronted by two SD agents, both of whom Tagami shoots dead with an antique American pistol. Back in Colorado, Joe abruptly changes his appearance and mannerisms before the trip to the High Castle, leading Juliana to deduce that he intends to actually murder Abenson. Joe confirms this, revealing himself to be an undercover Swiss Nazi assassin. Juliana mortally wounds Joe and drives off to warn Abenson of the threat to his life. Wegener flies back to Germany and learns that Reinhard Heydrich has launched a coup against Goebbels, possibly installing himself as Chancellor. Meanwhile, Tagami remains shaken by the shootout and goes to Charlton to sell back the gun he used in the fight. However, instead, sensing the energy from one of Frink's jewelry items, Tagami impulsively buys it from Charlton. Tagami then undergoes a spiritually intense experience where he momentarily perceives an alternative history version of San Francisco. Later, Tagami on a whim forces the German authorities to release Frink, whom Tagami has never met and does not know is the maker of the jewelry. Juliana soon has her own spiritual experience when she arrives in Cheyenne. There, she discovers that Abenson now lives in a normal house with his family, having left behind the High Castle due to a change of outlook. He no longer preoccupies himself with thoughts that he might soon be assassinated. After dodging many of Juliana's questions about his inspiration for his novel, Abenson finally confesses that he in fact used the I Ching to guide his writing of The Grasshopper Lies Heavy. Before leaving, Juliana infers then that Truth wrote the book in order to reveal the inner truth that Japan and Germany really lost World War II. The Grasshopper Lies Heavy. Several characters in The Man in the High Castle read the popular novel The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, by Hawthorne Abenson, whose title is assumed or supposed to have come from the Bible verse, "The grasshopper shall be a burden." Thus, The Grasshopper Lies Heavy constitutes a novel within a novel, wherein Abenson writes of an alternative universe where the Axis powers lost World War II. For this reason, the Germans have banned the novel in the occupied US, but it is widely read in the Pacific, and its publication is legal in the neutral countries. The Grasshopper Lies Heavy postulates that President Roosevelt survives an assassination attempt, but forgoes re-election in 1940, honoring George Washington's two-term limit. The next president, Rexford Tugwell, removes the Pacific Fleet from Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, saving it from Japanese attack, which ensures that the US enters the conflict a well-equipped naval power. The United Kingdom retains most of its military-industrial strength, contributing more to the Allied war effort, leading to Rommel's defeat in North Africa. The British advance through the Caucasus to fight alongside the Soviets to victory in the Battle of Stalingrad. Italy and Hungary renege on their membership in the Axis powers and betray them. British tanks and the Red Army jointly conquer Berlin. At the end of the war, the Nazi leaders, including Adolf Hitler, are tried for their war crimes, wherein the Führer's last words are Deutsche, Hier stehe ich, in imitation of Martin Luther. After the war, Winston Churchill remains the British Prime Minister, and, because of its military-industrial might, the British Empire does not collapse. The Soviet Union, crippled by war losses, collapses. The US establishes strong business relations with Chiang Kai-shek's right-wing regime in China after vanquishing the communist Mao Zedong in the Chinese Civil War. The British Empire becomes more racist and expansionist post-war, while the US outlaws Jim Crow laws, resolving its racism by the 1950s. Both changes provoke racial cultural tensions between the US and the UK, leading them to a Cold War for global hegemony between their two vaguely liberal, democratic, capitalist societies, although the end of the novel is never depicted in the text. One character claims the book ends with the British Empire eventually defeating the US, becoming the sole world superpower. Inspirations. Dick said he conceived The Man in the High Castle when reading Bring the Jubilee by Ward Moore, which occurs in an alternative 19th-century US wherein the Confederate States of America won the American Civil War. In the acknowledgements to the book, he mentions other influences: The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, by William L. Shirer; Hitler, A Study in Tyranny, by Alan Bullock; The Goebbels Diaries, Louis P. Lochner; Translator, Foxes of the Desert, by Paul Carell; and the 1950 translation of the I Ching by Richard Wilhelm. The acknowledgements have 3 references to traditional Japanese and Tibetan poetic forms. Volume 1 of the Anthology of Japanese Literature, edited by Donald Keene, from which is cited the haiku on page 48. From Zen and Japanese Culture, by Daisetsu Teitaro Suzuki, from which is cited a waka on page 135. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead, edited by Walter Evans Wentz. Nathaniel West's Miss Lonely Hearts is also mentioned in the text. Written before the Roosevelt assassination, divergence point that separates the world of The Man in the High Castle from ours. In this novella, Miss Lonely Hearts is a male newspaper journalist who writes anonymous advice as an agony aunt to forlorn readers during the height of the Great Depression. Hence, Miss Lonely Hearts tries to find consolation in religion, casual sex, rural vacations, and work, none of which provide him with the sense of authenticity and engagement with the outside world that he needs. West's book is about the elusive quality of interpersonal relationships and quest for personal meaning at a time of political turmoil within the United States. Philip Dick used the I Ching to make decisions crucial to the plot of The Man in the High Castle, just as characters within the novel use the I Ching to guide decisions. Reception. In The Religion of Science Fiction, Frederick A. Kreuziger explores the theory of history implied by Dick's creation of the 2 alternative realities, neither of the 2 worlds, however. The revised version of the outcome of World War II nor the fictional account of our present world is anywhere near similar to the world we are familiar with, but they could be. This is what the book is about. The book argues that this world, described twice, although differently each time, is exactly the world we know and are familiar with. Indeed, it is the only world we know, the world of chance, luck, fate. Avram Davidson praised the novel as a superior work of fiction, citing Dick's use of the I Ching as fascinating. Davidson concluded that it's all here: extrapolation, suspense, action, art, philosophy, plot, and character. The Man in the High Castle secured for Dick the 1963 Hugo Award for Best Novel. A new paperback edition of the novel was published in 1992 by Vintage Books. Audiobook. An unabridged The Man in the High Castle audiobook, read by George Geidel and running approximately 9.5 hours over 7 audio cassettes, was released in 1997. Another unabridged audiobook version was released in 2008 by Blackstone Audio, read by Tom Weiner and running approximately 8.5 hours over 7 CDs. A third unabridged audiobook recording was released in 2014 by Brilliance Audio, read by Jeff Cummings with a running time of 9 hours 58 minutes. Television. after a number of attempts to adapt the book to the screen. In October 2014, Amazon's film production unit began filming the pilot episode of The Man in the High Castle in Roslyn, Washington, for release through the Amazon Prime web video streaming service. The pilot episode was released by Amazon Studios on January 15, 2015, and was Amazon's most-watched pilot ever. According to Amazon Studios Vice President, Roy Price, on February 18, 2015, Amazon greenlit the series. The show became available for streaming on November 20, 2015. The television series diverges from the novel in many significant respects. Both the Pacific states of America and the Eastern American puppet state appear to be mere provinces of the Japanese and German empires without any apparent autonomous government institutions whatsoever. The Rocky Mountain states become an anarchic neutral zone. World War II appears to have ended following the destruction of Washington, D.C. with an atomic bomb, rather than a land invasion as in the book. As for Hitler, while elderly, he is apparently mostly hale in his Season 1 finale appearance, though other characters elsewhere in the season do reference his supposed physical infirmity. In the novel, the Italian Empire is a minor power that controls North Africa and the Middle East. In the series, however, it is shown through maps that these territories are part of the Nazi Empire, suggesting that either the Italian Empire was annexed after the war or is self-governing within the Reich. Characters from the book that do appear are in most cases far more fleshed out with deeper and sometimes rather different backstories than their novel originals. For instance, Wegener is a standard Führer in the SS, rather than a naval captain. Rather than being a member of an organized internal resistance, Wegener is a close personal confidant of Hitler, and his disillusionment with the regime appears to be largely personal. Juliana and Frank are unmarried, but living together, rather than divorced and separated. Frank has a sister, nephew and niece, although they are killed early in the series, and this propels him into a more active role in relation to the resistance. Juliana also has a sister whose murder by the Kenpeitai early in the season instigates her search for the mysterious man in the high castle, as well as her having a mother and stepfather who are significant supporting characters. Joe Cinadella is renamed Joe Blake, and as he becomes closer to Juliana appears to have growing doubts about his role as a Nazi agent. Robert Chilton is, however, a more minor character in Season 1 than the original, while Ed McCarthy has a rather more prominent and active role. There are several major additional characters introduced by the television series, and numerous narrative details in the plotline differ radically from the source novel. For example, the planned Nazi preemptive nuclear strike on Japan, Operation Dandelion, is apparently being prevented only by Hitler's personal refusal to authorize it, leading Heydrich and the faction demanding preemptive war to plot the Führer's assassination. In addition, Hawthorne Abenzen does not appear in the first season of the television version, and The Grasshopper Lies Heavy is a series of newsreel films depicting multiple alternative realities rather than a novel, as of the Season 1 finale. These films are being tracked down by SS agents like Blake for dispatch to Hitler for an as yet unknown purpose. In Season 2 we see a map of the world on John Smith's wall. From this map we can see that Japan controls the entirety of the Pacific Ocean and most of the Asian continent, including China, India and half of Russia. Japan is also shown to control Australia, New Zealand, Western Canada, Alaska, and all Pacific states of the USA. We also see that the Japanese Empire controls the Yucatan Peninsula and South American countries like Chile. In contrast, Nazi Germany is shown as controlling all of Europe, Africa and the Middle East. The German Empire also controls all of the United States and Canada up to the Rockies in the West and South America including Brazil. Germany also controls the western parts of former USSR such as Ukraine. There are also buffer zones between the empires. Neither empire seems to have invaded Mexico, and this neutral zone continues up through the Rockies and through Canada. A similar neutral zone is seen dividing Russia in half. Season 2 also shows two very different lifestyles in the Japanese-controlled Pacific states and the German-controlled East. The Germans have colonized the eastern states and are assimilating its inhabitants into Nazi beliefs. The Japanese Empire is occupying the Pacific states rather than colonizing them. There is enforced segregation between Japanese and American citizens. It is implied that Native Americans were exterminated by the Germans, and that the Japanese exterminated the native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, along with most Alaska natives. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?